Welcome back to the Whispering GM, and welcome back to the Honda recording studio. That's right, I am coming at you from the car as I'm on my way to the hardware store, so hopefully this will be cohesive. The original plan was to do a panel with some friends over just the right amount of prep, and that is still going to happen if I can make that happen. It's just we had some stuff come up that'll it's kind of postponed the recording, so I'm shooting from the hip from a backlog of topic ideas that I wanted to talk about. And today, I'm going to talk about why bronze, roleplay, and OSR gaming in Antiquity. Anyone who's been around me for any period of time is probably familiar with my affinity for classical antiquity. From the rise of Sumer and Akkad to the proliferation of Phoenician letter script across their trade networks, into the Mycenaean explosion, the Greek Dark Ages, and through the Age of Rome. That's my jam. Now, why do I want to talk about it today? Well, inspired by Monsters and Treasure, Monsters and Treasure, there was a kind of an off comment made equating the Bronze Age with Mudcore. Well, what is Mudcore? Mudcore, for folks who may not be familiar with it, is a sub-movement within the OSR where your party doesn't advance. It's just low treasure, low level, retire when you can, high casualty adventure. Now, some people enjoy that. I don't typically run that, but I've played in it before, and it can be fun. And as such, I am not coming down on Mudcore, nor is it my intent to take a shot at Monsters and Treasure. I just wanted to, from where I'm sitting, kind of clear up how Bronze Age doesn't have to be Mudcore, nor does it naturally seem Mudcore to my personal experience. And so for this episode, I'd like to go through first why the Bronze Age caters to the OSR playstyle, and second, why you should use the Bronze Age to inspire your home game. When you think of classical Greece, what is the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, that's going to be the Odyssey, or perhaps the story of the Minotaur. Those are two great examples of why the Bronze Age or Greek Dark Age portion of Antiquity fit very well into OSR gameplay. First, to speak to the Odyssey. It starts at the end of the Trojan War and chronicles the voyage home for one of the heroes, Odysseus, Lord of Ithaca. He gets, as a result of, I guess, the gods being mad at him, it's been a while, gets pushed off course and spends many years at sea, going from place to place, having fanciful encounters, island to island. Why is this OSR? Well, how does your campaign operate? In my experience, especially as an adult, many campaigns operate in a somewhat episodic manner. You'll have arcs and plots that come together after the fact, but by and large, you're showing up to have an adventure. You're going to a dungeon. You're traveling overland to get to a site for an adventure. Similarly, you're not just fighting your way through. There is fighting in the Odyssey, but that's not the primary mode that he does his deed. He has to think his way through. Consider the Polyphemus, the Cyclops. In order to escape, they first fight him, but not to defeat him, but to blind him, and then they escape by throwing wool over their backs such that he thinks they are sheep. So, one, in that one adventure alone, you have 3 huge elements of OSR gameplay. 1, travel and thievery. They were trying to steal from him. 2, combat with mythic monsters, men versus the Cyclops. 3, roleplay opportunities. Odysseus talks to the Cyclops and uses his wits to... He calls himself Nobody, so that when the Cyclops calls for help, he calls, "Nobody has attacked me." And then the other Cyclopses are just, I guess, that's cool, and they leave him alone. And then he thinks his way through and he uses a disguise to make his way out. So you have roleplay, you have combat, and you have inventive solutions, all in the same chapter, all in the same sub-story within this one poem. So if you have not read the Odyssey, read it. It is so much awesome. It's a great source of material. And while everybody has heard of the Trojan Horse, and a great deal of you will have heard of Polyphemus, there's a ton of stuff in there. He has 8 years worth of adventures, and I guarantee you're going to find something in there that your players may not have found. Or you're going to see something that you can twist to fit your game. Especially in the low-level dungeon crawl. Does Odysseus crawl through the dungeon? Well, does he have to? We just talked about the Minotaur. The entire story of the Minotaur is that a prince of Athens, I believe, goes to the palace on Knossos, goes into the labyrinth, and kills the Minotaur. So the labyrinth is quite literally an underground, impenetrable dungeon where he has to think on his feet. 1, roleplay, an intrigue, his affinity for the daughter of the king. She's the one who gives him the thread that he uses to track his way back out. 2, combat. He sneaks a knife in and fights a Minotaur. And then 3, it's a dungeon. It's literally an underground dungeon that's designed to contain said Minotaur. So, again, the Bronze Age as a whole is a great source of inspiration for your low-level adventure. That's all and well and good, but what does Antiquity have to offer me if I'm running a mid or a high-level game? Well, I could very easily fall back on the Aeneid, the predecessor event to the Odyssey, but instead, let's fast forward a little bit and look at history. Julius Agrippa was the last Roman commander to attack Great Britain. Now, everyone who listens to this podcast is likely to have heard of the Adventurer Conqueror King system, and anyone who is familiar with Adventurer Conqueror King will know that the Oran Empire, its default setting, is based on the Roman Empire. The high grade, we'll call it, I almost said something impolite, but the high tier attention that's paid to domain and so and what, that is based off of Roman sources in that period. So to talk to Agricola, he fought the Chalcedonians, he brought a legion with him, he defeated them. An interesting clash of culture, they were still in the heroic mindset. The Celts at the time used chariots to ferry warriors forward and challenge the commanders for duels, and the Romans did not do that. The Romans had moved into a much more, at that time, modern approach. So he came up, he was able to break their cavalry, he was able to defeat the infantry over a fort, and establish a garrison north of the wall. Now, it is true that by the time of Hadrian, they would have abandoned this by order of the emperor and recalled him to Rome, but look at that experience. What did he do? He put an army together. Roman legions were frequently funded, or at least promised funding, by their commanding officers. He moved them into enemy territory. He defeated an enemy force, established a base, and let's see, can I get into my neighborhood? They're doing some paving here. I'm not sure if I'm gonna... Yes, they let me through. So, thank you. Anyway, so what did he do? He funded an expedition. They moved into enemy territory. They met the enemy in the field and then established a garrison. Does that or does that not sound to you like mid-tier OSR play? When you put together an army, well, first you go into the dungeon, you pull out a bunch of gold. What do you do with that gold? There's not that much to spend it on. Well, you spend it on people, retainers, hirelings. You end up building a house so that you can store your gold and your wealth. You transfer it into gems, you do whatever you need to do, and then you go on and you conquer a bear, you smash you pacify a hex, you get your D4 villages on the hex, and then you build a castle. There are rules for designing and building a castle. So where I'm going with that is that historical event, and you see this over and over in Roman history. Caesar did it in Gaul and Egypt, for example. Arguably Germanicus did it in Germany. But the point is, the antique period offers in history and in literature, especially if you go into the literature of the Romans, the Greeks, and so on at that time, stories about conquest and fighting against the odds, being outnumbered by Vercingetorix, but coming out on top anyway, through gall and through ingenuity. If anything speaks to a hero freshly spending his gold and expanding his horizons over the hex, this period is perfect to fit that idiom. So, I've spoken to why the Bronze Age caters to the low-level play with dungeons and monsters, and I've spoken to why it caters to high-level play with strongholds and conquest, and I've also talked a little bit about how the Bronze Age isn't what you necessarily think it is if you look at actual history. And I've kind of pushed it forward to allow for the inclusion of all of Antiquity. So the last thing I want to talk about, though, I really love about the literature and some of the real-life stuff, but more so the literature, the Appendix N for classical antiquity. It is an age of heroes. There are big names. The big names do big things, and those are your characters, or the ones that survive. But they are flawed. They're not paragons of virtue. Most of them are also not bad necessarily. They're not out to get you, but their motivation is largely human. One of the characteristics of Appendix N, there's a gray morality. It's not save the world. When Conan is fighting against the Picts, he's doing so because he's a mercenary, because he's defending his kingdom. He's being paid to do it. Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, they're thieves. That's their job. And they're in it so that they can benefit. And don't even get me started on the wizards in Vance's Dying Earth. And then we can dial that in, and I've gone forward in time towards the Roman conquest of Britain, and I've gone backward, middle in time into like the Greek Dark Ages, but we'll go back to Gilgamesh. King Gilgamesh, one of the earliest sagas in human history, set firmly in the early Bronze Age. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, he's kind of a jerk. They send a wild man, the gods send a wild man to humble him, and that works. They become friends, and civilization is imposed on the wild. And he goes on a quest for immortality. He does fight some monsters. The life of his friend is paid as a consequence, and he doesn't find it. What does he find is that death is a constant and that no man is above the gods. But all the way, his story, his experience, where it goes leading armies, ruling cities, to 2v1 demons in the woods, and then on epic quests where he gets to speak to Utnapishtim, the survivor of the flood, of perhaps a common thread to Noah fame. All of this, he does it for his own sake, for his own goals, that aligns with the way the game is generally played. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I don't think he's a role model, but that is the tone that the game is trying to convey. Because if you're in the dungeon working together to pull gold out, whose gold is it? Why are you why are you stealing it from these people gone past, or these monstrous humanoids? Or when you're in the wilderness, why are you building? You're driving out the orcs, the evil creatures that you're out there, and then you're fighting with your friends. You're creating a PvE. If the game continues into the mass combat phase, you're fighting with your friends. And so the purpose of the game is not to try to impose morality in an OSR context. The purpose of the game is to walk through these kind of feedback loops. And when you produce those experiences, Appendix N is designed to help you get into the right mindset for those experiences to flower. So when you talk about stories like that of Gilgamesh, and it could also be spoken of for, say, Agamemnon in the Trojan period, who sacrifices everything for his own ambition, but eventually, spoiler alert for a multi-thousand-year-old poem, he eventually is murdered by his own wife as a result. But these stories, they fall perfectly into the same theme, the same tone. The characters do things for their own good, they grow for their own good, and it really puts you as the reader into a mindset of, if I play this as a game, the OSR process, the OSR framework works. It just works. And for that reason, and the reasons before, but this one especially, I really enjoy that the heroes aren't heroic in the modern sense, but they are heroic in the Homeric sense, in that they are blessed, they are skilled, and they are clever. And that's what you want to be when you hit that high level. So, stories, legends, and so on, and literature for the Bronze Age and Classic Antiquity really fits the OSR Appendix N. Next, and I've relocated from the car into the house, so hopefully y'all can't hear the 2-year-old who is kicking the door trying to get my attention. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some misconceptions regarding Bronze Age life. Did they have challenges? Yes, in real life, there were challenges with famine, there were challenges with disease, but truth be told, the majority of the Bronze Age was a highlight in society. Things were better than they were before, and to say that this epoch suffered more than others is probably misleading. Consider, this was the period in which the pyramids were built. This is the period in which the Colossus at Rhodes was built. So they had the wherewithal, they had the capability of doing big things. Further, during the medieval period, there was a reputation of Arabs to have knowledge of medicine. Where did that knowledge come from? Now, you could say there were Arab doctors, and there were, but the majority of Arab medicine was acquired when they conquered Alexandria. They took over the libraries, and then they were able to assimilate the knowledge that was present in the Hellenic world before. Consider the Heron's engine. This is a period in time where they were able to use steam to drive a shaft. Now, did they use it for anything other than curiosity? No, that's because they ran a slave culture, and it's much easier to capture foreigners and force them to do your farm work than it is to figure out how to engineer a steam engine. But that's beside the point. Where I'm trying to go with this is the Bronze Age, especially at its height, was a period of great learning. The alphabet was invented at this time and kind of standardized by trade. Medicine advanced. Hygiene advanced. The Bronze Age Egyptians pioneered toothbrushes. They have found Egyptian toothbrushes that were dated to this period. So while, yes, there are going to be challenges and dangers, that's normal, and that's what you want in a campaign, but by no means was this age any worse than any other age for that purpose. I mean, their breath didn't even stink. Depending on the toothpaste. This was also the point at which coinage was invented. Recall, I've harped on the Phoenicians a bit. They were primarily traders, but at this time, the bronze cultures would often trade in oxhide ingots for copper and torques made of tin, but the Romans and Etruscans would pioneer coins. They would use, in Egypt would move gold, but their gold was primarily worked into artwork or jewelry, but the Romans would move on to use coins, and they would actually pay for things in coin, which was a first in the West. So to that end, by no means can we equate it necessarily with mudcore. We can. There are muddy aspects, but there are also magnificent monuments which honestly were not eclipsed until well into the modern epoch. So what do you think? I know that a lot of fantasy and modern vintage is either Tolkien or Tolkien inspired, but my listeners, I know you guys have read through Malazan. I know you guys have read through Anderson. What do you guys think? Have you dug into this? Is this something that you think might be fun for your game? Is there an appeal to you for marching across the desert sands? Is there an appeal to you for getting 50 of your good buddies into a byreme and booking it for lands unknown? If so, the Bronze Age might be for you. Or, at a minimum, elements of the Bronze Age might be good for your campaign.
Hey Taylor, Jason here. Just listen to your Chainmail Bikini episode. Great episode. Some great phone calls from your listeners as well.
And here's another. What you got for us, brother?
As far as how to use a Chainmail Bikini in the game, how to make it work, you could always just do something using levels. So the fighting man's level, I wouldn't do it for other classes, but the fighting man's level could provide a modifier to their AC. And then if you felt that was overpowered against other fighting men or maybe monsters, you could do the difference between the levels of fighting men, or the difference between the level of the fighting man and the hit die of the monsters, and add that difference to their AC. So 5th level fighting man fighting a second or 2 hit die monster, second level fighting man would just subtract 3 from their AC. So that's one way to do it as well. I'm sure you probably have smarter ways to do it, but just figure I'd throw it out there.
The good old add your level. So that is something that I tried back in 3rd edition, and I can share what happened then. So with 3rd edition, this was the first official D&D that WotC put out, and they introduced Ascending Armor class. And as a result, you stopped having your attack matrices, and instead you had a base attack bonus. And for fighters, this increased every level. Now, contrast that to old school editions, where you got a bonus to hit essentially every 3rd level. It jumped up in tiers. The same thing would happen for clerics and magic users, or wizards as they were called, but that was done by bumping the bonus differently, and we're focusing on fighting men. So what happened with the fighter doing that is it became immediately a double down malice for the lower level character. If unmodified in 3rd edition, I'm first level attacking somebody with scale mail and a shield, that's pretty standard, I think. And so usually your melee combatant would have between a 17 and 19 armor class. So with my +1 bonus, and we'll say I have a +1 or +2 strength, it was easy to get good stats in that edition, and you got bonuses from your stats earlier in that edition than you do in TSR or Gygaxian versions. So you'd be rolling a 15 or so in order to hit. Now, if we add that base attack bonus to, which is corresponding to level, to my AC, at first level, I now need a 16. That's not too bad, fighting an even keel. But let's bump that up to 2nd or 3rd level. I now have plate and shield, and so my AC is 21 or 22. As soon as I add 3 to that, 25, and so plate mail was like 3. So now you're talking about a first level character attacking a 3rd level character needing a natural 20 to hit. It became unwieldy very quickly. Thinking about your version, well, and with TSR this wouldn't be as pronounced because your bonus to hit would only occur every few levels, so it would be super pronounced 2nd and 3rd level, and then 4th level it would be less pronounced, but still a thing. I'm in the car, so I don't have the math, but to continue along the ascending armor class route, if you did a halfsies, that's less pronounced, but it still doesn't do away with the underlying problem that why am I better at attack than I am at defense? Always. In current days, I'm playing the old school, I'm trying to play Chainmail, I'm trying to incorporate elements of Chainmail that'll help that for me. The bigger abstraction officially is hit points, because my hit points are more that represents like parrying and dodging in addition to meat. But before I ramble on too much more, I think that the answer might be in parry. So if I am attacking, then I can add my full bonus to it if I'm ascending armor class. Or we're going to jump back. Let's jump back into TSR version. My THAC0 is, say, 17. I can choose to impose a minus to my attack up to my hit dice. And, well, yeah, that's fair. We'll go with that. So let's say we impose a malice to our hit, up to our hit dice. So we are hitting less accurately, and we get a corresponding bonus to our armor class. That might work, because we're penalizing ourselves on the attack. We are benefiting ourselves in defense. You have your plate and your sword and board guy up front, hiding behind a shield, intentionally trying to tank. That makes sense. This may work better. I may do some math when I get home on that one. So, thanks for brainstorming that through with me. I will. That will be something to think about as a potential house rule. Try to incorporate parry, which did exist in old school, like Chainmail at least. I'm gonna have to look back and see if there's something like that, because I am not good at AD&D. There may be a parry in there that I don't know about, but yeah, I think that's the right direction to go if we're talking about defending ourselves using the ACS and getting better at defending ourselves as we level. So, good thought. I appreciate you calling in, and I appreciate you brainstorming that with me.
Hey, Taylor. It is M.W. Lewis here, calling not from the car, so I won't be rudely interrupted or have to fear the police or swerve to the left or the right. So I just listened to your comments on my call-in. Thanks for running it and making some really great comments. And I was actually going into northeastern Tennessee into those mountains, Cherokee Lake area. It's Kingsport, I think you meant to say, right on the border there with Virginia. So I was actually going right by Kingsport just about the time of the call-in, somewhere around there.
Kingsport. That does ring a bell. I remember when we had family up there, we were way high on the mountain, and on a clear day you could see Tennessee and Virginia from the back patio. Good times. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is the township I had in mind.
And I'm actually you say you vacation that way. I'm actually looking at buying some property up there on Cherokee Lake in one of those highly managed communities. And property prices have dropped a lot, and I see one I'm looking at right now that it's dropped quite a bit. So I'm not a wealthy man. I can't put a house on it until I'm ready to move. If I decide to move there, maybe in 5 years, but at least I can get a plot right now while prices are good. Or I always could buy a house later, but with the way houses pricing goes, that's a risk.
Best of luck on your acquisition. We used to go up there all the time when my family still had property up there, but unfortunately my granddad had the voting majority, if I remember that right, and so we ended up having to sell when he passed. But I did mention on X not too long ago. See, Elon, I'm calling it the right thing. I did mention on X that when I retire, or if my family in Florida dies and I have no reason to stay here, East Tennessee. Would love to go up there. Would love to get that 0% income tax at the state level. I think you have a sales tax thing. You have a sales tax thing, maybe a capital gains state level. But people don't come here for financial advice. They come here for D&D. So yeah, you, me, and I think another buddy of mine was talking about. Yeah, he would love to retire up in them mountains. So yeah, if we all end up there at the same time, at least I know when I retire, we'll have a table waiting for us.
So a couple things you brought up I thought were really cool. I can get to you on Discord the link to my little screen thing, that little flip screen I use. I talked about it in depth a long time ago on my podcast, but I will give you the link. And if you want to share that with your listeners, feel free.
Received. And thank you. I will put it in the show notes for anybody else who was intrigued by that.
This thing about the trust with the players, you're right. I have a group of players that if they do work really hard to not metagame. So if I drop or some information gets to them by accident, they're really good to try to ignore that and try to still explore. Now that doesn't mean you don't want, if you're constantly doing that, I don't think anyone would enjoy it. But every once in a while, something might get revealed by mistake, or they might even figure something out, or may, one or two of them may have already even played the particular scenario, but they're really good at trying not to do that. And then there are other, and then there's those who are kind of like the power gamer type and always trying to get an edge, and they, for whatever reason they feel like, D&D or RPGs are like competitive sport, which they're not, right? They're not even like competitive board gaming. To me, it's a different kind of thing. It shouldn't even be competitive. So I like that about my group, once in a while. In fact, sometimes they go so far that I have to step in and say, if you do this, you're not metagaming. Or like, for instance, the other night, they found a note that was written in a code that none of them could understand. And in the same room, in a chest, they found a helmet of reading languages. And they had the fighter try on the helmet. And when I said to the fight, and they used their wand to detect magic, they detect magic on the helmet. So the fighter put it on, and I said, you don't feel anything. You don't feel like this is going to give you an edge or anything. And I do that. I kind of, if the players are willing to try on magic items, I try to let them know if they're feeling any kind of sensation, even if you don't tell them the exact armor class adjustment. And I do, actually. I get lazy. I just say, yeah, it's -1 on your armor class. That way I don't have to track it. So they passed it on to the magic user who was trying to read the note, and he said, the guy playing the magic user said, well, Would it be too obvious for me to try to read the note? Would that be too, because he put it together, right? As players and experienced players, they figured it out right away. And I said, no, if you feel that that's the connection, then do it. Just go ahead and do it. And that's, I like that about my players, though. They're trying to keep the element of, mystery in the game, even just for themselves. Not even that they're trying to be fair. They just want to have that in the game, and I have to intervene a lot of times and say, no, go ahead. You would be able to figure that out, or that would make sense that you would figure that out.
I also will tell them the direct bonus, essentially once they figure it out, or when they try it. I remember trying to do the figure it out game at some point with, I think it was with, the ones that got me were always weapons. So if I gave them like a +1 dagger, we'll say, I had to remember the +1 part. And if you have multiple players at the table, they have multiple items that they're trying to figure out, it just isn't worth the bookkeeping. So yeah, I agree with that.
So anyway, I don't know. I think there was something else you mentioned that I wanted to comment on, but I can't remember. So, good show. Another good show. I enjoyed it. About the barbarians and loincloths.
Many thanks. I am wearing a loincloth as I reply to this message.
Really, and it is true. The Gauls probably did fight naked. There's evidence of that. Not all of them. A lot of them might have. But this whole idea of fighting, it's interesting. It is certainly a modern thing to have people fighting one-on-one with weapons naked. Outside of some kind of gladiatorial gaming, I don't think many people would do a one-on-one sword fight with someone without armor and a shield. I think most people would be pretty protected in a fight like that. There's a reason why almost all the ancient armies, all the way through the Middle Ages to the advent of the gun, used armor. You don't want to get, no one wants to get cut. So anyway, good show.
Thank you again for the call in, and thank you again for the encouragement.
And that wraps up this episode of the Whispering GM podcast, a product of Clericware Ringmail and an independently operated production for educational and informative purposes, released under the Totally Steal This license. Some sound effects are retrieved from Pixabay, made available under the Creative Commons 0. Others are retrieved from Mixkit.co and used under the Mixkit.co royalty-free music license. Theme music is Dirty Blues, composed by Michael Ramir C., retrieved from Mixkit.co and also included under the Mixkit.co royalty-free music license. Parties interested in or with questions regarding the podcast are encouraged to reach out via the methods provided on the Clericware Ringmail blog. Thank you for listening, and delve on.